Hey, Pete.
Can you hear?
I can.
Okay, great.
Good catch.
Now, paranoid.
All right. Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen. Yes,
All right. Full screen.
full screen.
Perfect.
I was gonna say I move my phones to stun too because usually it tries to call.
My internet starts acting up sometimes. So if I just stop talking, I'll be back in like 10 seconds. So you can,
Okay, I'll be aware of that then.
yeah.
That's not the pregnant pause of deep thinking.
A few minutes here.
They don't forget to welcome everybody in and for coming. I'll introduce myself if you want to when you throw me the screen then. So.
Yep. Get started here in a minute. All right, Pete, we'll get kicked off here. I'm sure we'll have more people join us as we move forward. But I just want to welcome everybody tonight. I know most of the country caught a little bit of rain, so we should have a pretty good attendance here. But just want to welcome everybody to the organic certification and overcoming hurdles. This is an interesting topic because I started organic about 6-7 years ago now. At age about 23, I jumped into it not knowing what I was doing, and it got through the certification process, and I look forward from the 6 to 7 years, and it's a lot different when I was doing it on pen and paper and keeping track of everything in a shoebox to where we are today. So it's an interesting journey, and it can either be a how do I put it? Be a hassle and a burdensome type of situation, or you can use it to benefit the farming operation through collecting all this information and data that we have to hand in through certification. So with that, I'll move to the next slide. So there'll be two presenters tonight, myself, Bryce Robeck, as co-founder of AgriSecure. Again, built AgriSecure out of a necessity for our farm, going from that doing everything on pen and paper, trying to track everything down from certification into having it all into a digital platform that we're able to utilize it. So fifth generation farmer. My goal was not to farm conventionally when we went back, so we jumped into organic. Worked for Midwestern BioAg before that, and now run AgriSecure. and do have an organic farm back in West Central Iowa. With that, I'll turn it over to the second presenter, Pete, to introduce himself as well.
Yeah, thank you, Bryce. My name is Pete Kapuska. I'm in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Grew up outside of here. As you can see, I am a fourth generation farmer. Started farming in the early 80s after growing up on a farm and attending Iowa State, but got repositioned in life in the early 90s, like a lot of farmers did, and have spent a lot of my time since in retail as a certified crop advisor, working through the co-op system. I was a seed DSM for a number of different companies through the years, some big in technology, some that are currently in organic space. Worked as a input supply representative for a number of different companies, including one that serviced Midwest BioAg, and some other companies that dealt in products that are certified organic. And along the way, became appreciative of the opportunity that people have to pursue organic farming. And with COVID last year and an opportunity that showed up to me, I actually got back into active farming. So I'm coming at the organic space from a number of different angles, and in some ways putting my money where my mouth is and probably going through some of the same questions that people entering the business today would be going through.
Thank you, Pete. So we'll jump in here. Pete and I will go back and forth on a few slides as we go through it. I think we have about 34 slides, and we'll try to get done with this in an hour so we don't hold people over. So one of the things that in organic that can be overwhelming, actually most surveys that you see to be the biggest barrier in organic becomes a record certification. As we see as a producer, and these are very true, we have a bunch of decisions to make during the year: field rotation plans, marketing plan, equipment investment, crop inputs, risk management, execution plan. I can keep reading on a list of a few hundred as we go through this, and the decisions become much more difficult than conventional because we don't have all the information and knowledge, and there's nowhere to access that information knowledge such as there is in conventional. So one of the things we focus on is taking away something that can be overwhelming is record keeping and certification. We'll go through a bunch of different scenarios as the night goes on, but it is one of those things that become a hassle if it's not taken care of and taken care of well. It becomes more complex and more of a hassle as you move forward. We want to also acknowledge that we have some questions that the participants sent in before the webinar tonight, and I'll answer a few right now, and then I will answer them as we move through the process as well. And so what's the first step to certification? And the first step is designing a plan to get through transition very well, and how you document how you document transition, how you document it with the government, with the certifiers, what you can use through transition. So the first step is really developing that plan to get through transition without any type of issues, such as using a prohibitive substance, not getting things documented in the correct place to USDA or insurance or certification. And then going into certification, if we're looking at that first step, is to apply for certification at your certifier. So just the first steps is developing that plan of how you're going to get to A to Z. And those steps in between vary depending on the operation. And so one of the things that we also want to look at is what is required for
I think what Bryce was getting to is that there are a number of things that are required for record keeping that kind of go through on the calendar and crop basis. So you want to make sure you're keeping up to date and a current level in order to avoid pitfalls that come when you have to learn or reimagine what your field passes and
through the harvesting and things like that. So what is required for record keeping is a large. Pete, can you still hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes.
All right, perfect. I apologize. Our internet is going in and out tonight. So if I stop talking, Pete will fill in here. So record keeping, that's a large question we'll go through tonight, but there's a tons of things that have to be tracked and kept. When we work through the top priorities, the OSP and the inspection, we'll reach through that tonight, and I will we'll go over that question as we walk through. And we do have a question that popped up in the chat, so I'll read it now. One of the things is communications with certifiers needs to include the date you have to have certification complete and why. So we'll address this, but I'll address it now because it's very important. knowing when you're going to need to be certified at, and each one of our customers is different. We know if an individual is doing corn or soybeans, it's likely September 1 is a good certification date for them. But if they want organic wheat or alfalfa or something that's going to be harvested earlier, we need to make sure we have the inspector out there, we have all the paperwork done before that is harvested, because the rule states you have to have it inspected before you harvest it. And so it's a good thing to throw in there to think about in the first steps, is to know when you're going to need that organic certification to harvest your crops.
Bryce, I'd also like to add at this point too that keeping in mind with certification on that first year organic crop, you want to have it completed prior to the sign up for federal crop that comes in July in order to get the proper insurance coverage.
Yes, that's a good point, Pete. So along with getting the certification needs met for your crop to be considered organic, a July 15th deadline to have the certification in hand is a rule for the USDA and the insurance companies to be able to certify your crop as organic and get organic insurance on it. Now, in the past, a lot of insurance companies have let this kind of they have let it slip a little bit, but we see it tightening, and they're demanding that you have that certificate before that July 15th timeframe, depending on your insurance company. So the rest of these questions, we'll hit them through the night, but I just wanted to go through a few of these first before we get started. The agenda tonight is timeline, record keeping. Then we'll hit the pinch points and the watch outs. What do we need to look for certification? Then being ready. Then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So the timeline, what is required for the National Organic Program? The National Organic Program enforces a uniform national standard for organically produced agriculture sold in the United States. And I read that line for line because that's what it says, but it's really varies. There's about 100 different certification bodies. So the ICSs, the OCIAs, and they all have slightly different interpretations of the NOP. And so it's not as uniform as we would like to think as we would like things to be in this. Each certification body, and when I say that, that's 100 different ones across the United States that have slightly different rules that allow for different things and different operations. So your neighbor could be doing something a little bit different than what you're doing, and it would be okay in one certification body, but not the other one. And so we really want to make sure you understand what your certifier is going to allow and what your plan is going to be. Now, there's things they enforce. You can't use nitrogen or anhydrous and things like that, but there's little subtle differences between each of them. But going into the NOP's rules that they set that need to be complied during transition, there's a 36-month transition period where the field is farmed with organic standards, but you don't get an organic certificate and you can't sell it organically. You can sell transition and get a transition certificate by following the rules. But during that 36 months, it included not using any prohibitive substances, seeds, or any practices that would be prohibitive. And you can do it in 2 crop years if you plan it right. It's not necessarily have to be 36 months of crop years. So something that we help plan out and think through. The use of organically approved seed and or non-GMO seeds as well, depending on what you're doing, what the availability is. So those are the seed requirements, and the use of appropriate crop insurance, plan for fields in transition, and transition approved accredited certifying agent. So one thing we see people do that try to insure a transition field conventional because the price guarantees are higher, the risk is less. This will come back and bite you eventually. If you show up and have 2 years of conventional and all of a sudden show up organic in the insurance eyes, they'll see that you've never transitioned and it'll throw red flags and it's fraud. So we just want to make people aware of when you're transitioning, you have to take transition insurance. It's not as good as conventional insurance because your APH has dropped down to an organic level. So just something to be aware of. Record keeping activities and crop inputs applied, including, so you need to record all activities, all the crop inputs applied, the invoices, the seed tags, and the product labels have to be kept during transition. When you come to organic, they will ask for those, or they can ask for those to be presented to allow for for them to prove that you went through transition. And then again, we talked about reporting transition to the USDA through the local FSA office. Those are the 578 maps. It's another place that you can put transition corn when you write out your map and planting date to document that as well. Pete, we have a few questions here. I'm just going to read through them and see if we can answer any of these.
I was going to say, I think one of the things to think about too is that as you go through that 36-month period, it doesn't correspond with the planting date or the calendar date. It corresponds with the harvest date as being the acceptable time as to when you can harvest that crop and have it for sale. So as you alluded to, you can start that organic crop year in the middle or end of that second year of transition, but harvesting after that 36-month plus 1 day time frame, if everything is in place, you can sell that as a certified organic crop.
Correct. Thank you, Pete. And so one of the questions here is there a way to harvest and store your crop before certification is complete? And that's a very good question. From what we've done working with the growers, there is a way to do that. The certification companies do not like to do that, but one of the things that we have done is left part of the field unharvested, meaning 10 to 30 feet, depending on what that is. So they could see that it's clearly an organic field, those types of things. So there is ways to do it without having to be certified before you harvest it. But we recommend to highly plan appropriately to be inspected before that harvest of the organic crop occurs.
I think one thing too is you want to be proactively talking with your certification company that you're working with in order to make sure you're on the same page as far as what documentation and what protocols they want followed in order to maintain or to get that certification.
Thank you, Pete. Yep, that's a good point. So when we look at the process here, so we have a 5-step process to break it down. The first thing is to complete that transition period, the 36 months with being in compliance of the NOP. The second part is to complete the application paperwork with the certifier. And this varies by certification body, but typically it requires some basic information of your operation, signing a contract and an initial payment. Then the part of completing an organic system plan, there'll be anywhere from 15 to 25 modules that you have to complete about your farm. That includes information on your fields, your acres, your crops planted, rotations, inputs, storage, farm processes, everything about your farm that they need to know to uphold the NOP standards. You'll then submit that for a review. Usually there's different questions that the certifiers will come back to us with that they need modifications or more clarification with. And so when you hand in that system plan, you want to be as thoughtful and complete as possible, but understand there are different aspects of this that they'll come back and ask for clarification. After that has been submitted, they will assign an on-farm inspection. So a certifier will come out and actually I'll break it down as we talk tonight. A certifying agency sits above an inspector. They're the company that hires an inspector to go out to the farm, see that you're organic, inspect everything, get the documentation, those types of stuff. The inspector brings that back to the certifier, and the certifier makes the ultimate decision on the farm, whether you're certified or not, and holds all the data and information for that on the farm. So clarification between certifier and inspector. Certifier is the body that you'll interact with. Inspector comes to your farm one time a year to gather that information and do the inspection. So one of the questions that just popped up that I just want to clarify, this PowerPoint presentation will be shared with attendees, and we'll share it as well publicly so you can have access to it. So good question. So after we have that on-farm inspection, the inspector comes, they look over your field history, they look at your farm records, your seed tags, your invoices, they look at your grain site, how you're doing clean outs, your clean out logs, pretty much anything that is in an NOP standards, they can ask you for to be able to see that and verify that you're doing it or have a procedure in place to be able to do that. or to provide for NOP standards. So after that, on-farm inspection is completed, execute crop production per the OSP and record keeping. So just you continue on with your plan. You have harvest, you store those, you track everything that you store off the field, and then by load out of the field, and you keep that record keeping for next year on-farm certification. And a certificate is sent to you that you then have to use when you sell the crop that's coming off the field. So looking at working back from harvest, or working from harvest back, certification efforts should start with ample time to receive your organic certificate, as we talked about earlier, especially if this is your first organic crop. We won't get into the first and second organic crops, how those certifications overlap and work, but first organic crop, you really want to be planning ahead to make sure you have that certificate by first harvest, and definitely by July 15th to incorporate the less risk into your operation. So if you're looking at the timing from the OSP submission to when you're approved, we find it between 14 and 21 days. Time when you submit that OSP plan, that number, that third box that we talked about, or the third bullet that we talked about, and then another 14 to 21 days to have inspection, an inspector come out after that OSP has been approved. And then after that, another 14 to 21 days to be able to provide or get that certificate back from the certifying body that you're certifying with. So if we look at small grains and we start on May 15th, we're looking at a July 15th certificate date. April or May 15th on the corn and soybeans, again, in July 15th. So you need to have everything approved by May 15th and go.
Yeah, I think as Bryce has mentioned there, the timelines are things that you want to keep in mind for your crop insurance dates. It's also good then to obviously keep in touch with your certification agency who will assign that independent contractor inspector to work at your farm. So making the most of the time that you've got with the certifier is important to have all your records together in order to keep on that timeline. Seems like we may have lost Bryce. Yeah, I think that's an important thing, is to be proactive in your conversations with the certification company and with your inspector when you have the opportunity to meet those thresholds of information that they require for certification. It does give you more opportunity to have a more casual conversation about things that may overlap into your farming operation from other operations, or to get a better, fuller explanation of things that are required as you go through the certification chain of custody or through the NOPS as far as information that's necessary.
Pete, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now. We kind of finished up on this slide, I think.
Perfect. I apologize. I live in Des Moines right now. I can't get stable internet, and I lived in Africa, Tanzania, for 6 months and never dropped a phone call. So can't really figure that out, but can't keep stable internet in Des Moines here. Anyway, going through this, as we talked about, Pete, did you finish up this slide?
I think I pretty well hit that, yes.
Perfect. So looking at streamlining the process, there are several opportunities that exist to streamline the certification process by providing good, timely information in an organized manner. And I know there's a few certifiers on here that are attending tonight. And one of the biggest things that we look at when we work with certifiers is if we can organize the information with each of our clients in the same way, so you understand where it's going to be, how it's going to be presented, how you need to look through it, how everything's going to work, it really streamlines it for the certifier, for our growers that we work with, and us. It makes things a lot more efficient, and I actually think it makes things a lot more accurate. to be able to present an OSP that's structured, a field history plan that's structured, crop inputs that are going to have attached invoices, seed tags, and the necessary labels, as well as the seeds. And so at AgriSecure, what we've done is digitalize that process to make it the same each time. And the inspection, when we go to the inspection, having the input records that we can digitally pull up, not in a shoebox anymore or in a big binder. Our sales records can be pulled in a matter of seconds. Have mass balancing that's automatically running through the system. The field maps that are digital, and activities completed with cleanouts and inputs used, also digital. And so having all these structured, whether it's through our platform at AgriSecure or if you're doing something other, having that structure and building on it at a farm so it's the same every year has been one of the most beneficial things on our aspect of our farming operation. We don't worry about certification anymore. It's not a slam at the end to get everything together, to have it in. Certification could happen tomorrow. It could happen 10 minutes from now, 2 weeks from now. We're ready for it to occur. So with that, Pete, I will hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Bryce. Yeah, I appreciate everybody coming on tonight. I think one of the interesting things that I saw is that a majority of the people on here tonight are already organic. And so I have to ask, why are you here? And I think I understand the reason why. You're trying to make sure that you are staying in compliant, that you're keeping everything in the most up-to-date condition, and you're maybe looking for that next new opportunity to make sure your operation is not just organic, but better than just being certified organic, that you're going at a higher level. And that's kind of been our mission too as a company, is to move with customers to that higher level of professionalism and being able to consistently have a structured system to be able to manage and track all the information necessary for certification and recertification, and also archiving that material too. But yeah, as we look at the things that are needed, I know Bryce touched on a number of these things. They are things that in one way or another are requirements of having compliance with the certification program as there is. And as you go through each of these items, think about how you're currently managing those systems, how much time that it takes to manage those. Your time is not invaluable, especially at certain times of the year. If you're able to manage tasks easier, you can devote more time to things like planting and doing management strategies. So as we go through and look at each of these individual activities that are necessary for compliance, think about how you're currently doing them, and think about what would make life easier if you could go ahead and change things to improve everything. So we do have to track all our field activities on a work order type basis. We do need to have documentation of cleanouts and affidavits for manures and for seeds if necessary. We need to keep those physical components, seed tags, invoices, OMRI certificates, making sure that all the ingredients that we put into that field are in compliance, having a legible mapping system, a professional way to look at where the fields are, and to be able to document where those buffers and borders need to be. And then also being able to track that harvested grain through your chain of custody on the farm in order to present it with a bill of lading to the end user in order to stay in compliant and get that premium in the organic market.
Thanks, Pete. And I'll just add in one of the questions we have from the participants that was before, just to sprinkle these in. One of the things that we have is, how do you find the right certification agency? And Pete, I can answer that, or I'll let you if you want.
No, I'll take a quick run at it, but I think you probably have a good one. I think first thing is, if you've networked with a number of friends who are doing organic, it certainly helps to have referrals of understanding how agencies and farmers work together. There is a large difference in, I think, certification companies, as there's a large difference in how organic operations are run. So I think what you want to do is put yourself in a position. I think that as we see things going forward, you want to go forward with people that match your level of activity and engagement. And by that, I mean, if you've got a question about a product or a service or approach that you're taking in your organic farm, and you need an answer right now, you want to be able to reach out to that certification company and get an answer. We find there are some companies that are not as responsive as other companies in the marketplace. So there does have to be that courtship or that discovery period in order to find a good match and a match that will be there going forward.
And no, I think that's a good answer, Pete. And I'll just add in, for us, it was somebody that kept up with the technology, being able to digitally do stuff that accepts digital records from our farm. And so I think it's you have to find that match. And if your first question is which one's going to let me get away with, what I think is I want to do it, you're already headed down the wrong path. And so I think really sitting back and seeing which one matches your farm, your level of information, and the way that they retrieve and accept information has been the most important. So perfect. Pete, we'll move on to this next.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's been kind of an experience that we've had as a company too, that people do come and go. I guess you'd say as customers would go. There are people that are less satisfied, that are wondering if there's a better way out there, that discover us and we work with them. So, and I think that is part of it, that we do have that path going forward with technology, that we're capturing that information in the digital format. And this is just an example of some of the information that you'll need to stay in compliance by having a work order that's put together. And you can certainly do this by hand with a calendar and with a notebook. But on the right side of the screen there, you can see that having a digital a digital product, we're able to capture more of that information and include things on there like the clean out information that you need to provide, that when you do and complete the work order based on an actual date versus the planned date that you set up in your original plan, you now have the ability to put that clean out information in there and track both of those things going forward. Your work order system stands on its own, and that information is then put into a format so you can generate a report for your recertification on a clean out log. So there's other documents that you're going to need to, and how you handle them is important. And one thing to think about too, how you see documents on your farm may not be the way that your certifying company or your independent inspector sees that document information. So at AgriSecure, we've developed a system for managing the paper that most people have floating around in their truck or in a notebook, and being able to use the technology of a smartphone in real time to capture images like seed tags and invoices and affidavits, all those things that are necessary for the compliance and the recertification or certification on a year-to-year basis. But then it's permanently there as an archive. And it's not in a computer system like people are using with spreadsheets to manage information on a laptop at home. Those things crash and eventually you'll lose those records. Our management system is cloud-based, so it's more stable, more safe going forward. And as always, the information is your information. It's retrievable at any time, and you're also able to take that anywhere you want to go. So yeah, as you go through the information that you provide, you're also able to generate reports. Here's an example of a field history report on a farm showing that product in red there as being a non-compliant product that started the clock on certification. So we're able to track all that information and present it in a PDF format that's very easy to move forward with your certification company.
Thanks, Pete. And just a 10-second blurb on that, thinking about as you get more fields and you get more history, keeping track of that in an Excel sheet gets pretty hard.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, with that Excel sheet, most people are still using a calendar or a notebook to gather that information. So they're moving information 2 and 3 times just to have it in a format in a computer that eventually crashes. So one of the other things we do at AgriSecure, and I think has value to you as a customer, is that information for certification has other applications in your farming operation. One of the things that we get excited about is the ability to see how your labor and machinery flow is throughout the year on a per acre basis. This grid identifies those pinch points, those times of the year when you're most active in the field, and gives you a good idea of what sort of capacity you need to meet that obligation. One thing to consider too, we do have information, there's National Weather Service data out there, but we also have a database that can give you, for your specific county, the amount of fit work days on average within that county and the range of what's most likely. So you can start to see size and scale of what you've got for machinery and why you feel so stressed in May. may mean you need to move and think about your rotation in different ways in order to remove some of that stress. All that information on the machinery and work order system can also be used to help manage the economics on your farm and do modeling of what if scenarios for different cropping systems. What I like about it is throughout the year, you can go ahead and make adjustments in real time to account for maybe drier weather that reduces bushel yield. Or if we see market conditions improve, you can start to see a change in your financial position, all with all that information that you started and entered into the computer or the cloud-based managing system. So when you're looking at the service that we would offer and then paying for it, you're using multiple streams of information when you're done in real time where you can make better management decisions.
And just to sum it all up there, Pete, it's taking it out of the shoebox, taking everything that you're already doing on certification, putting it in a digital format and be able to utilize all that certification information that we're already gathering and taking time to do.
And the nice thing is too, everybody's always carrying their cell phone. That cell phone is the tool that can enable you in real time to capture that information. So you're not reconstructing records later. You're not having to go to the notebook every time and write things down. And so at AgriSecure, we look at the opportunity in organics and we broke it into four major parts of looking how we put that plan together in real time, being able to execute and track that plan, and then generate the reports and the information that you can use in real time to manage your operation better and more efficiently and more effectively and with less stress.
Thank you, Pete. We'll move on to the pinch points and watchouts here and take the next 4 or 5 slides to go through that. And so one of the things that we've found a little difficult during the application time is crop input approval. And this varies by grower to grower. We have, like myself, I use 2 inputs, well, 3, I should say, seed, manure, and calcium sulfate. So my input approval is pretty quick, pretty fast. But we have some guys that use 60, 70, 100 different inputs, and it's a risk they're taking. It's definitely a risk to use that many inputs if you're not on top of it. But we need to understand how long it takes to get inputs approved and how to do it. Knowing that it's critical to have that approval. If you apply an input that for some reason isn't approved, it can take a field out of certification. But there's really 3 inputs that we look at here. 3 types of inputs. The simple one is an approved by an OMRI. So there's an OMRI database out there that approves products that has a label. This usually takes 3 to 5 days to get approval through the certifier. It can be done faster, but most times it's not. The second one is a simple restricted. So it's restricted based on needs. So for an example, if you're going to use a micronutrient, a lot of those are approved but restricted to show a need to be able to use it, which is, it's not hard to do. We have to have soil samples, we have to have other supporting factors while you're using a micronutrient, but it takes a little bit more time, 5 to 10 days. And then we move into a complex type of situation where there's not an OMRI approval. It's a bug of jugs that your neighbor made that wants you to try it. There's no label for it. It's not approved. There's no real documentation. So we have to go back and get each ingredient, or we have to go back to the manufacturer and get what they have put into it, which can sometimes be difficult. And this can take up to 30 days to be able to be approved. So we won't dive too much into this, but just understand that the products, before you put them on a field, we highly recommend having the approval of the certifier. And this will allow you to lay off some risk to that certifier. So if something came back and it wasn't approved, but you got the approval for the certifier, there's a leg to stand on there. And this is a good point from an individual in the crowd that has certifying experience. And just to let us know, this can vary certifier to certifier how they look at these. So with our certifier, this is how we've documented it and went through it. ICS, International Certification Systems. Now where food comes from is what they're named, but each certifier changes a little bit, so it can be difficult, but the same premise still stays. Manure and litter amendments in March. This is just an example. We ran across a company in Nebraska that was using prohibited substance on some of their chicken barns, and there's potential for organic people to use that. And so we caught that. We sent it out to the people that we work with and let them know that, hey, make sure if you're getting from a Costco barn that you have the manure affidavit and that nothing was added to it. So just looking at these bullet points here, make sure when you purchase any type of manure that you verify with the seller that nothing's been applied to it and get them to sign off on that, as well as amendments. We have found an egg laying type of situation, there's not as many amendments, but it's still recommended that you verify with the seller pertaining to the hog, cow, and cattle manure operations. There could be pit amendments that would make it not approved for organic. Again, you need to check on that. So verifying with the seller and getting that signed documentation is one of the responsibilities of the grower to be able to provide that. One of the other situations that we came into this year, lots of situations, is weed slayer and an organic herbicide that gained popularity in the last couple of years here. But just to give you a little insight of how we walk through this and what we do at AgriSecure and what you need to do as a grower as well, if you're not a part of our group, we gained insight about developments regarding the use of weed slayer and organic herbicide. Is often used in management plans, but as a standalone product, weed slayer is permitted. So the actual product weed slayer is permitted with restrictions. So that restrictions is you can't use it as a sole means of weed control. You have to provide other things such as crop rotations, cultivation, rotary hoeing, those type of things to be able to use it. And that's the restrictions part of it. Now, what we learned is weed slayer really does not work as a standalone product. It has to be mixed with a prohibited product called AgriGold WS, which is prohibited for organic production due to the detection of prohibitive substances within the AgriGold. And so if you're going to use weed slayer, you have to use AgriGold to make it work. We learned that from the manufacturer that weed slayer will not work alone, but the substance that goes along with it is prohibited to use this year for sure. It's being reviewed, and the manufacturer is looking at other ways to be able to provide a catalyst to weed slayer. But we tracked that down. We went right to the manufacturer. We understood what was going on, and we recommend not using weed slayer this year. Number one, it doesn't work without the AgriGold, and if it's with AgriGold, it is a prohibited substance. So a good idea, a good lesson that we went through to learn how to track all this down and understand what is really going on. With that, I will turn it over to you, Pete, to go through the inspection and be ready.
Yep. Yeah, I was going to say one nice thing, and I guess that's part of the advantage of being part of any network group is the collective knowledge is hopefully shared amongst the participants. And we try to do that at AgriSecure and be proactive where we can. Bryce, do you want to advance the slide?
Yep, it's frozen there for a second.
So as we think about our certification, we do have the requirements of the NOPS that growers agree to that allow the inspection on their farm at an annual level. At least they can also come in for unannounced inspections at any time. Typically, there is an announcement of an unannounced inspection. So there is time to clear maybe 4 or 5 hours to get information up to date that may not already be there. But you want to have at any time those records that we talked about available and up to date. And with technology and with COVID last year, a lot of these are now being done in a virtual way, although there usually is on-farm components as well. So you got to be aware of those opportunities that you sign up for when you sign up for the organic is allowing others to come into the operation, announced or unannounced, to do the normal things that they need to keep their company in compliance with the government as well. So yes, we do know that the USDA does have requirement that 5% of the operations certified annually will get an unannounced inspection. So depending upon how you feel about your odds, you may or may not have that, chance. I will say too, though, that the certification bodies also are subject to the same sort of an unannounced inspection that they have to open their books for the federal government and the USDA to make sure that their customers, the accounts they work with, are in compliance and that they're documenting things in the proper fashion as well. So the biggest takeaway, I think, of all the information that's out there is to make sure that you keep your plans up to date and you're tracking activities in and out of that field, and that you have a script ahead of the season in order to give yourself the freedom to manage in season according to the plan, and then when necessary, make changes and additions as you go. And that's being proactive in things, in putting your records together and keeping your invoices and seed tags ahead of time, of using organic produced seeds where you can and where you have confidence and when you have the ability to understand how that product performs on your farm. And if not, then taking the steps necessary to make sure those conventional varieties are in compliance. And then being able to track that grain information. I think that's one area where it's difficult. It can be difficult to manage information on crops in the field as they move into a parking spot, a storage spot, if you will, and then moving into that end user. Most farmers are not used to doing bill of ladings and then tracking their settlements in such a way, labeling their bins and really labeling all their activities, whether it's the area within your shop that you store organic seeds or other inputs that you need from organic separate from other places. That transparency and that forwardness in information is helpful in a lot of different ways. And especially if you're a parallel operation, an operation that contains both conventional, organic, and I'd put transition acres in there as well. You've got to disclose certain things on those conventional acres and certain things that can go with the transition acres. And of course, with the organic production acres, a little higher level. But all of those things need to be accounted for and disclosed according to what your certification company requires. So keeping those records and keeping them as easily and comfortably accessible as you can is really important. And I think that's one of the great things about the AgriSecure approach, using the technology that's out there in the marketplace, and especially your smartphone, to in real time be able to capture your records. I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today about how it seems difficult to keep up with some of the certification information. And yet I'm talking to a farmer that has RTK guidance. As he's going across the field, he's basically watching his monitors, but not doing much of anything else. If he's a customer of ours, he's got his smartphone out. He can update his information necessary for compliance of what he's doing in that field and tracking that information as well. It's also great to have backup information. We always encourage people that even though they are working with AgriSecure, that they keep paper records of those initial invoices as well. It's always a good idea to keep a backup in the system. And if you're using a computer, certainly you want to make sure you're backing up all the time. And then also, most operations are more than just one person. Certainly a lot of operations we do business with, it's a husband and wife team that are managing and keeping records. They both have to be on the same page about getting that information and the importance of having it captured in the proper process. And then as you maybe have a larger or growing operation, you're bringing in people from the outside world that need to be coached up and taught up about what you're doing and how to do things on a task by task, or as they grow and mature in the business, having more responsibility. You're responsible for that farming operation. If that newest employee has an issue, it's your issue. It's not his issue. So yeah, as we think about things, we can kind of go through in a mentally, but also here we've got in front of you a checklist of things that you need to be thinking about throughout the year. And these are just not everything, but certainly as we're going, as you look at the left side of the screen there with harvest, there's a lot of information that most farmers in an operation of conventional don't think about. Tracking all those clean outs, either purging or having that buffer strip harvested and managed separate, and then clean outs ahead of that. And then the documentation on bill of ladings and when those transfer dates occur. And then as you go into the storage and handling from there, you've got to make sure that all your paperwork aligns in order to present those bushels for settlement with a company that's going to pay you the agreed upon price for that organic product. So it's one of those things. I don't think you can be too organized when it comes down to it. We find that it's a lot easier to let things slip through the crack if you're not paying attention. So as far as the certification part of things, we're going to put that on pause for a minute. We have had some interest in looking at the markets that are out there, especially the corn and bean markets. And at AgriSecure, we do have a relationship with our parent or a company that has an ownership interest with us, Farmers Business Network. They and we work together in a marketing program approach so that we do now have a market advisor on organic grains and crops that are being grown. And this is some information that he has shared with us. His name is Don Clement. And at some point, if you're interested, we can hook you up with Don in order to give you a consultation on what he helps farmers develop into a marketing plan. And the reason I think that's important is, and I guess having farmed myself in the early 80s and been around agriculture all the time in between, I didn't realize, I knew there were differences. I didn't realize the depth of the differences between the conventional and the organic market in terms of price discovery and price compensation. When you think about that conventional market, if you've looked at it all in the last 30 days, it's been pretty volatile with the movement up and down. There's a board of trade. There's liquidity in the market as funds are getting in and getting out. There's market information that's readily available from around the world about weather or what's being shipped out of what ports. In organic, that information is harder to get a hold of, and a lot of it is private data, so it's hard to get any information at all. If you want to sell a bushel of conventional corn, it's very easy to pick up the phone and sell a bushel today. In organic, the price discovery is different in that every sale is a one-to-one negotiation between an end user and a farmer. Sometimes there's brokers or other intermediaries in between, but it's a slower, more patient process. There is volatility in both markets, although with organics, there tends, just because it's a higher price point, typically, there can be more volatile movement in the market at bigger chunks over time. There are fewer people out there that are purchasing organic grains, but there are a number of them out there. So there is opportunity and growing opportunity to market more of these organic crops. The delivery points can be an issue, so those have to be factored in with contracts about the cost of goods to those end users. And then understanding that there is a difference between how one entity and one company will approach purchasing and another. So there's a lot of difference in market price. So having more information is certainly better than having less. So as we sit here today, if you want to go on to the next slide, Bryce. As we sit here today, this slide, just like everything else in agriculture, things change over time. Where we're looking at right now, according to Don Clement, is that we have seen this conventional market rise, and it has impacted the organic market to some degree or another. We have seen a reduction, we think, in organic acres that are coming into the market this year. We've seen probably poor producing organic acres exit the market. And there again, we have the normal attrition of farmers and farmers that are organic retire too and leave the industry. We know that there's low stocks on the conventional. We know there's low stocks on the organic side. And there is a forecast that we will see price appreciation through this year on corn. And then also, as you can see, we are seeing movement in soybeans. Soybeans are extremely tight. There's been some overseas factors that have come in on soybeans, especially in India, where we do import a lot of our organic soybeans from. There's been a crackdown of sorts with standards being enforced on what is organic. And because of that, a number of bushels that used to show up at the port and go into the organic chain are just going into the conventional bean chain because the market price is good on conventional. So we are seeing that reflected in our domestic price. Right now, the domestic price is anywhere in that 20s mid area. We're seeing movement towards even $30 right now. And as you can see, the new crop bids that are out there, we're starting to see those move up as well. So the information, as I talked about earlier, is hard to come by. And as an individual farmer, it may be difficult or impossible. And most guys are comfortable working with the one or two people that they've networked with or that are geographically close. but they may not give you the full story about what that market is really doing. And it is easy to get kind of lulled into accepting just that first bid or that bid when it's enough to cover your break-even costs. So one other thing I would say about looking at that marketing and marketing plan is, just like a good conventional plan, you have to understand your costs associated with production so that you know what a fair price for your labor, for your machinery, for your inputs, for your time, for your management is, and then hopefully a profit margin, and know when you sell that crop whether you're going to be making money and satisfied, even if you don't hit the top of the market, or if you're selling at a price that doesn't cover those things. I see a lot of people in the conventional world, and I'm even seeing it in the organic world, where we have had typically higher prices, but they'll market grain at an area that doesn't reflect their true production costs. So getting a handle on those and having those up to date, I think, helps Don create that very good marketing program. So as we try to wrap some of this up, we want to be thinking about beginning in that transition phase. We want to be thinking about what it takes to be in organics in the long term. And probably one of the biggest things is crop rotation, trying to manage what can be grown on my farm and what can be marketed well. We want to make sure those plans are financially well as good for your organic rotation. Weed management is typically one of those things that eats away at profit very quickly if it's not done well, and all those relate back to that rotation. We talked a little bit about equipment and how to manage time and equipment properly. So those are important things. The fertility and crop inputs, we tend to coach on being a minimalist in making sure we cover those basics of a crop. And then over time, as we get more familiar with organics, moving into higher and higher levels of classification of inputs and management. Record keeping and certification is obviously very important without that. And I would say to an equal degree as production, record keeping and certification is that other half of organic. So many farmers come to us with the idea that, hey, I'm doing cover crops, I'm thinking about managing my soils better than my neighbor, I'm ready for organics. Well, production system alone does not make you organic. It has to be that certification in equal, or in some cases, a higher standard than the operations in the field. And so agronomy and marketing are big parts of things too. So you want to have structure, you want to have a plan, you want to have a team, you want to have trusted people that you can go to for those what if questions that will invariably pop up, and hopefully somebody who's got a lot of experience in those areas. So at AgriSecure, we have built a very strong team of individuals that are able to help you go through that organic experience of deciding whether it's a good fit or if the opportunities just aren't right on your farm, of giving you the tools and support and the coaching, and in some ways the shoulder to cry on as you go through that certification program, because not everything works perfectly the first time, but we put ourselves in a position as a company to help people get through. And I don't think we've had anybody who has started with us, that has worked with us through the program, that has not gone on to become certified. That planning and execution is really the key, though, going forward, to making sure that you're able to go ahead and stay in the organic sphere for a long time. It's easy to do one or two crops in organic, but if you're not getting things documented, if you're not keeping your rotation right, if you're working too hard in corn and beans, you're eventually going to spiral and things are going to get out of control and you'll be out of organics. And then, of course, the marketing, understanding what your costs are in order to get a fair price. And then when you do get a fair price, being able to pull the trigger and not become that person who waits for that next highest level of crop bushel price, but misses what's already in front of them.
Yeah, thank you, Pete. That's a very good explanation. And as we come to the end here, I'll open it up for questions. I'll give one question here from the starting point that we had before the webinar, is how do you qualify for regenerative organic certification? And this is a very good question. On our farm back in West Central Iowa, where actually I am applying to two different one regenerative organic certification and one just regenerative certification. So our farm will have 3 to 4 different certifications this year, hopefully when we get done. But to apply for regenerative organic certification, there's only one company that I know of that's doing it. And it's ROC, Regenerative Organic Certification. You can Google that. They have an online form. I can tell you it's not going to be speedy. I turned it in about 2 months ago and still working through that. If you're not organic, we work with growers too. We're talking about organic certification here, but we're starting to work with growers that aren't organic but want the regenerative certification label. We work with A Greener World to be able to provide that. Again, it's a lot of the same data and information that you're taking in the organic space. So to apply for regenerative organic or regenerative, it took me about 15 to 20 minutes. We already had the information and data. We just had to export it to them and allow them to sift through it and then come and certify us. One of the benefits of having it digitally there as well. So just want to go over that, and I'll check to see if we have any other questions. We don't, and so I will read one more of the questions I was sent in early. So addressing potential spray drift and mitigation. We get this quite a bit. I mean, just in agriculture, spray drift is inevitable, especially with the people across the country that we work with. It's going to happen somewhere at some time. And what we do is we put together a process of number one, document it and report it to the certifier, let them know what is going on. If you try to hide it, it's most likely not going to turn out well. Just with certification as well as with the inspector, it's good just to report it, and then we can put a process to mitigate it through with the certifying body, whether it is harvesting that crop and turning it and selling it conventionally, and then taking a soil test to make sure that there's no residue left in there. There's a bunch of ways we can do it, but it starts with reporting it and then figuring out a plan of how to mitigate it, which is different in every instance. So again, very important to report it and then figure out that plan. So with that, I don't see any other questions that we haven't addressed from the start. And I'll open
I was going to add one thing, Bryce, is we're kind of wrapping things up. We do have the contact information for AgriSecure at the bottom of this slide. You can also contact us about getting a consultation with Don Clement, the organic market advisor that we have with AgriSecure, who can work with you and see if you're a candidate or if you're interested in taking the next step to work with somebody to develop a marketing plan on your farm.
Thank you, Pete. We will make this public and we'll talk to their CEO, Steve, to make sure everybody has a chance to be able to review this or send it to whoever they want. Again, we appreciate everybody coming out. We appreciate the participants. Everybody have a great night.
Thank you.